Good morning, everyone. So I'm in one of those circumstances where I have far more slides than I have time to talk through all of them. So the slides will certainly be available to everybody, and if folks have questions as follow-up, you could certainly feel free to contact me. I'm going to talk some about an initiative that we have going forward that we just funded in the last year. It's a $100 million initiative focused on permanency innovation. About 77 million of it is going to grantees. As you can see, about 23 million will go to TA and evaluation. And the real focus here is to drive the development of innovative strategies around moving children through and out of foster care more quickly and at greater rates of permanency. And when we say intervention, we don't solely mean direct service. We need some combination of practice, policies, and programs combined together, which would increase the rate of permanency and reduce the length of stay, and that the target are those children in foster care who remain the longest. As some of you know, in the late 80s and early 90s, the child welfare system doubled in size. A great deal of growth, lots of financial obligation for both the federal government and the state government. As a result of that growth, in '97, federal law was changed to really emphasize the reduction of children in care by focusing on achieving greater rates of permanency over shorter periods of time. Subsequent to that policy, the next big change has been Fostering Connections, passed in 2008, and the responsibility there, in many ways, was to try to come back and address the unintended consequences of the earlier policy. A focus on permanency, however, resulted in a disproportionate number of older children remaining in foster care. Fostering Connections really tries to come back and make adjustments to the system to reflect the needs of those older youth. This is simply trying to show you that over the 14 years of the policy, by any reasonable measure, the policy worked. The policy was intended to reduce length of stay, increase permanency, so that the system is 25% smaller as a result of the policy. You can see on the far chart, though, that reductions are not just aren't just explained by the number of children exiting care. More recently, the reductions have relied almost exclusively on reducing the number of children entering care. This is a slide that just tries to demonstrate to you that not all children enter care and leave care at the same rates. And so this is just trying to demonstrate the probability, the cumulative probability of a child by age who enters foster care would be adopted. And so as you can see, if you come in under 1, your cumulative probability of exiting care is much greater than if you come in the system at 6 to 12 years old or older than 13. This is an attempt to show you the results of those two policies and the work that was done as a result of it. And so what you can see here between 2002 and 2009 is that it's not just that the numbers have come down, but the way in which children are exiting has also changed. So as you can see, in 2002, about 70% of children exited care through going back home. Today, only about 63% go back home. As you can see, the next category is related to adoptions. The percentage of adoptions have remained essentially the same over that period. The percentage of young people who age out of the system or emancipate has increased over that 7-year period of time. The number itself isn't dramatically different between these two time periods, but because of the overall reduction, the proportion of children aging out has increased. And as you can see, the other category has reduced down some. And so really what this initiative is about focusing on that 23% of children who have aged out of the system and really challenging the field to say, what could you do differently that would ultimately reduce the number of children who get to the point of emancipating out. This initiative is not about easing the emancipation process. There's lots of other resources going to that challenge. This is about trying to go back upstream and figure out what are the things that we could have done differently for those populations who remain in care the longest so that they no longer remain in care the longest. So the structure of the grants that went out include applicants proposing strategies that are informed by the research. We did a ton of research about each of the populations that remain in care the longest. So if you look at the stay for African Americans, if you look at the stay for Hispanics, if you look at the stay for children who have serious emotional disturbance, if you look at the percentage of children who are Native American and remain in care. So we tried to break it down in setting up the FOAs so that we could really target those populations that were at greatest risk of remaining in care. Applicants, the process itself includes both a local evaluation as well as a cross-site evaluation. As the numbers indicated, we set aside just about 25% of the money to go to evaluation in TA because we think that there's as much to learn around the evaluation, even if not all of these projects get to the great outcomes that we'd like them to. That we've given each of the grantees the first year to do planning, to refine their plans. During that planning year, across the 6 sites, they roughly have about $1.5 million to do planning. So this is not a cheap endeavor. Those dollars are intended for them to drill down as much as possible on their population, to use all of the administrative data that they have access to. It's also to do a comprehensive review of the literature so that they know everything there is to know about the population that they're targeting, and the opportunity is to look across all of the available research about what is an effective intervention on some of the issues that the populations serve. What makes this project really different from much of the work of the last 14 years is the last 14 years of reductions have been predicated on the basis that you could achieve them through a change in policy. By making the policy levers different, you get to the results. This initiative is saying something else. It's saying that policy change might work for some kids, but not all kids. And so what we're looking at is trying to combine policies, practices, and programs together as an intervention to say, for those who are most at risk of staying in the foster care, how do we accelerate their exits? There's an incentive structure here, so not only were the grantees provided a pretty rich upfront mix of funds to do planning, the average grant through years 2 through 5 are somewhere in the $2.5 million range. And then the first year is also intended to set a set of benchmarks for each of the initiatives, and there's a bonus payments available to those projects that can meet those performance standards. And as I indicated earlier, the push here is to have a rigorous and ongoing evaluation. It's multifaceted. We care a lot about process and implementation. All of the stuff out there about evidence says that implementation is really important, right? So we want to be able to document the implementation activities of all of the sites so we have a better understanding of the relationship between implementation and effective intervention. We're obviously focused on outcomes. We want to know the results in terms of individual child outcomes. And obviously, we want to look at cost effectiveness in the context of a public policy environment in which it's not just a question of can you get to a result, but can you get to a result within limited resources. So we want to understand what the cost effectiveness looks like for the intervention. And then the expectation is that throughout the project, there'll be ongoing dissemination. You know, we expect to learn a lot just from the drill down. To really be able to take a careful analysis of each of these very vulnerable populations to understand their experience in foster care as a basis to then think through how to intervene, What we learn from that drilling down, we hope to disseminate so that others can use similar methodology to gain better understanding of the populations that they serve, so that even if we're not giving them another grant to do this work, we're moving the field forward in their ability to distinguish those data elements that mean the most in moving kids versus those that are less important. So with that, I'll shut up and get out of your way. Thanks.